extremely well the person who lived there. The idea of working, living, and creating a universe which is in evolution, constant evolution, and a way of using a small site quite well. And I think that was a quite inspiring visit in that particular house. It's like having access to everything about the life of somebody. And the second one, the Kolstrand building, achieve a different goal, but also represent all the desire and the goal of somebody who wants to achieve first the recuperation, the recycling of a quite interesting building, not noticeable that much, but this is something we should look at closely. Buildings are not necessarily pressing or extraordinary. They represent the reality of a city, and sometimes we have to look at them very closely and make sure that we don't make them to disappear because we want to build something bigger, something less expensive, because for sure it costs more to save a structure like that than do a new one.
Yeah, I work in San Francisco mostly, and there things, infill buildings become very formulaic, and those formulas get dressed up and used again and again and again. And these were, we thought, an example of two different ways of approaching situations that might come up quite often in Seattle. You know, the small lot for the individual client, the mixed-use program, and the old building that everybody says scrape it because it's cheaper to build new. And yet something can be so much richer, and you wind up with something that gives back to your community as a piece of architecture if you don't do that. So that's why we really admire both of these and admire them together. Two sides of a coin.
Well, without having any idea that they were connected.
Oh yeah, that's the one side of the coin, same architect.
Yeah. But I found them both kind of gritty, and there's a sort of loose fit in both of them about that they both had a strong sense again of client, and a kind of spirit of a client that's reflected in the building, but they also both had a sense of a capacity to adjust and adapt to life, that there was a kind of room for maneuver for users that would but the feeling that these buildings could adapt and change over time. I mean, in the case of the Kolstrand, for me, I preferred the parts that were the reworkings of the old building. I felt maybe the new addition was a little overscaled, whereas I felt the work in the existing building was really interesting and really impressive and worked well in terms of picking up on the character of the old and adding a kind of extra layer of interest and excitement to that.
It was interesting also seeing the life of the street that was very much spilling into the Kolstrand building. I mean, I think we were there at a lively time, but it was evening, and it was an enormously sort of rich environment that created inside the building. And when one looks along the street, one sees a lot of new construction going on. And I wouldn't be surprised if that building where it's been placed has actually extended some very exciting nightlife and such down in that area. And I think that this is a very profound, what we really talked about. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about how you think these two for Seattle are really emblematic. From what you saw of Seattle, how somehow they could be helpful to really think about. This is a city that's building lots of buildings right now. We saw new construction too, but these are doing something that you felt were really unique.
Well, I think you said it, street life is one. I think that when it's making the energy of the occupants accessible to the community. And I know it's a bike shop and people ride bikes in, and there's a lot of interaction. A restaurant, there's a lot of interaction, but the way that the building opened up directly to the street was one thing. So, there are some very specific things. I think also what Sheila was saying about the kind of potential social mixture of the people and what they do inside this thing has already created a kind of synergistic community. Yeah. And I think those are things that, the architecture helps.
Very much so. And actually, there was a group of people who had worked together before I think a filmmaker and several other, there was a filmmaker, there was a PR firm, and something else, a graphics firm or something. They worked together before, and they would normally not be able to necessarily find space together like this, but they were all kind of nested together. I think that was quite exciting. For me, it was very exciting to see.
I think those two buildings work well for Seattle and represent Seattle because they're real. They represent real life. We were at the end of the day in the second one, and the restaurant was preparing to light up. So they were preparing the table and everything, and we really felt that energy. People from Seattle will be there. They will be in relation with the building. So yeah, I think it's something a quite positive idea about who are the people that live in that city, and because they can be there and being in contact with that environment and together.
But there's also something which I think, again, as an outsider, I would pick up, which is now, I would see as almost a tradition of Seattle, which is the Kolstrand building, which is this use of these amazing devices in buildings, which other architects in Seattle also use, and I'd say it's very particular to this city, a sense of a relationship between engineering and construction and steelwork, and I get the impression there are really good steel shops where people make things that move and hinges, and I think that's a really interesting strand in Seattle architecture, which isn't happening everywhere else. And that, in the sense of in the Kolstrand building, the way in which the bicycle shop cafe opens to the street is very much part of that use of what has now become a Seattle way of doing things, maybe, which is to make these transforming elements, which are both spatial and constructional and active, which really enhance the architecture and really add to the character.
And you hear two clients describing those elements like if they were designing them. They understood completely what this was about, and about the concept of the building, about everything that was done there. I was very, very impressed by the knowledge of the understanding of the reality and the real meaning of all those architectural elements. It's not abstract in their mind. They understand them completely and they use them.
Even to the extent of one saying that he understood that the warranty was going to be voided within a year. So you fabricate it yourself, you take on the responsibility, it's just what you do.
And it certainly always helps to have a bicycle shop on premises as well.
Yeah, the repairman's right there.
So we are going to return at the end of the evening once more to give one other award in the measurable category, but we're going to now shift categories to a new category this year, the economic